Scrutiny Committee of Rutland County Council. This is the last meeting in this municipal cycle. And as we all know, we have elections coming up. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your commitment to this committee over the last year. And particular thank you and goodbye to those of you who are not standing again in May. So it will be goodbye to Gordon, who's joined us today, Councillor Gordon Brown, to Leah, Councillor Leah Toseland, to Rick, Councillor Rick Wilson, and to Ken, Councillor Ken Bull, who has not only served on this committee, but has served the council in many capacities over the years. And personally, I will say, will be sorely missed, as he and I have shared a ward for the last 12 years. And I've certainly come to rely on Ken on a number of occasions, if not continually. So thank you all. So I wanted to do that as part of my welcome. Have we had any apologies, please, Jane?
It says going down to the bid. Yes, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor Baines, Councillor Rosemary Powell, and Councillor Sam Harvey. We've also received apologies from Angela Wakefield and Kim Sorsky.
Thank you very much. Moving on then, were there any matters of accuracy that anybody wanted to raise on the record of the meeting on the 23rd of March? No, good, lovely. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the minutes of that meeting? Councillor Andrew Brown? Councillor Rick Wilson?
Thank you, Chair, all approved.
Thank you. Actions arising. There were no actions arising. Those of you who have read through those minutes will realise that it was all the actions were noted that they had been completed. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest on matters on the agenda tonight? No, thank you. Before I move on to petitions, deputations and questions, and we do have a deputation tonight, for members of the public and those watching online, to my right are members of the committee. To my left, generally speaking, are portfolio holders and officers. We also have with us Councillor Gordon Brown, who is a member of this council, and any member of the council who is not a portfolio holder is entitled to attend, and at the appropriate place will be invited to speak at the meeting. I've just said that for clarity for those who are unaware of the process. Thank you. So moving on to petitions, deputations and questions, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. We have received a deputation on behalf of the Rutland Quarry Forum. The speaker is Mr. David Hodson, who's the chair of the Rutland Quarry Forum, and he has also brought representatives with him. Mr. Hodson, if you'd like to come to the table and present your deputation, please. You will have a total of 5 minutes to sorry, to read your deputation.
Off the draw. Right, just let me briefly just firstly say what the Rutland Quarry Forum is, just so that people are aware of that. The Rutland Quarry Forum is comprised of representatives from all the parishes which are affected by quarrying operations, and also does have a representative from the Rutland County Council. Right, start the clock. Good evening. A brief recap on the history of the renewal of the Minerals and Waste contract with Northamptonshire Council. For preceding years, their performance had been unsatisfactory. They had been without a qualified minerals enforcement officer due to recruitment difficulties, and had up until recently even resorted to using a person living in Australia to process planning applications. In February 2022, this scrutiny committee reviewed a proposal to renew the contract with Northants, and doubts were raised about the wisdom of continuing with them. I presented a deputation from the Rutley Quarry Forum urging RCC to go elsewhere. However, the contract was renewed. The Scrutiny Committee mandated that there should be a review of performance after 6 months. It didn't happen. So here we are some 14 months later with a performance report. Apart from it being a flimsy and superficial report, it makes very sad reading. As predicted, Northants have had staffing difficulties. This is a continuation of one of the difficulties experienced prior to the previous contract. They do not seem to have succession planning or contingency planning within Northants for these circumstances. It doesn't make it clear whether they have a qualified minerals enforcement officer now, or at least I couldn't understand that. It doesn't say how many enforcement inspections were supposed to be carried out, and it doesn't make clear how many of them have been carried out. So why does it matter? Without enforcement of planning conditions, the whole process of planning conditions becomes pointless. The conditions are there to protect the health and safety of residents and the environment. Quarrying companies quickly realise when there's no enforcement and proceed to flout the conditions. We have already seen this at the Greetham Northwest Extension, where there have been 3 breaches of conditions in a very short space of time. There are 3 parts to the contract: local plan development, development control, and enforcement. Without enforcement, development control is seriously undermined. So 2 of the 3 areas of responsibility are failing. There is no report on how the contract is performing in the development control area from those directly involved. The report says that the underperformance doesn't constitute grounds for contract termination. How bad does it have to get before this can happen? Where is the information about the performance indicators? Also, the lack of technical understanding of Northants when advising development control has been highlighted to the committee previously. Despite this, lack of understanding is still prominent. For example, current determination process of yet another quarry in Greetham has failed to identify serious issues regarding monitoring and emissions from the site, which will lead to failure to enforce should any breach occur. This failing happened despite there having been readily available knowledge from specialists within the industry. Again, it was only identified by intervention of Greetham Parish Council. With an increase in quarrying applications, some of them significantly large, and Ketton cement work expansion on the horizon, Rutland County Council now need to look at revisiting this contract and look at alternative options such as engaging the private sector companies. By market testing this option, which they confirmed has not yet been done to date. The eastern part of Rutland County Rutland covers some 40% of the villages in Rutland, is predominantly limestone and interesting to quarrying and interest in quarrying will increase. It is time to replace the priority of ensuring value for money, and this contract is only £25,000 with Northants, and invest significant funds to provide mineral services that the residents of Rutland, which is fit for purpose. I strongly urge you to reject the report and mandate a new report which addresses the above issues. That's the end of my deputation.
Thank you very much. On a technical note, I suppose, this committee is not a decision-making body. And whilst we can say we don't like this report, if that's what the committee members decide, any positive recommendation would be a recommendation to Cabinet and or full council. The new committee that will come into place following annual council will obviously be appraised of what this committee has said, but and its chairman and vice chairman will decide agenda items. We cannot mandate it to take items. That's the technical part. Having said that, Mr. Hodson, can I thank you very much and your group for your deputation. I am sure that as we debate this issue tonight, members will very much take it into account. Now, how long do we have for questions, please, Jane? Is it 3 minutes?
The scrutiny committee members have a total time of 5 minutes to ask the questions.
Thank you. You have a total of 5 minutes between you to ask questions of Mr. Hodson. I see Mr. Bull first and then Mr. Beggy.
It's not, well, it is a question. Thank you, Mr. Hodson, for your, your deputation, and it is of concern, but I'll get to the point. What you are basically saying is that you are the watchman, you are the policeman of what is happening in Greetham at this present moment.
Well, broader than Greetham, we do represent all the.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Hodson, can you turn your microphone on? Thank you.
Yeah, broader than Greetham, we do represent all the, and there are other issues at other locations. And this is actually part of our concern, that we feel that Rutland County Council should be the policeman of the enforcement of conditions. And we aren't seeing this at all. It's basically very reactive. No one is seeing, the planning condition, the planning applications have conditions which should be followed. And as far as we can perceive, there is little of any effort from Rutland County Council in total to actually enforce those conditions.
May I have a very quick supplementary? So for the committee, how are you highlighting those failures? Because I think you said there were three failures. How are you
well, I think that
highlighting?
that was more that those particular ones were dealt with by the Greetham Parish Council, and they were raised with the planning department.
Mr. Beggy.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hodson, I'm just going back through my notes from the last Quarry Forum meeting, and I've forgotten some of the detail. At that meeting, did the RCC representative put forward potential alternatives to Northants, or have I dreamt that?
We did express our dissatisfaction at that meeting of the Quarry Forum with the performance of Northants, and specifically the enforcement. We did understand that there had been the representative from Rutland County Council were aware of other issues, and it was suggested that they might be looking in other directions. Yes, that was correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Ainsley.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for your deputation. You said that conditions are being flouted because there was no enforcement. Have you got examples of these conditions being flouted? Is that of the 3 you mentioned earlier?
Yes, could I ask David Baker, a colleague, to speak to that?
Hi, yes, if we look specifically at the very recently awarded planning consent for the Northwest Extension, the operator Mick George Limited, that was issued in mid-February. 2 days after the consent was issued, Mick George Limited wrote through to the planning authority with a proposal to undertake some work which was in direct contravention with a number of the planning conditions. 4 days later, he did that work. We had no response had been made by the county council, by the planning authority up until that point. We, Greetham Parish Council at that stage, had to notify the planning authority that the works had been undertaken. The planning authority notified Mick George. Mick George turned around and said, yes, there was a technical breach of those conditions, but the works needed to be done. But we've got to go back and say, well, a technical breach, it was a breach of, and I think there was about 7 or 8 conditions which they actually were in direct contradiction of.
Thank you. So these breaches, of which you think there were half a dozen or so, 7, did you say? Were these environmental? Were these detrimental to the community? Could you elaborate a little?
Yeah, the breaches were specifically to do with cutting down a hedge and removing a verge to form a new entrance. Now, this work was undertaken toward the end of February. One condition in the consent specifically said that no hedge removal should be taken place between February and September to protect birds nesting in that particular area. The other conditions I'm referring to all state that no development on that with that application would take place until a number of reports and understandings had been completed and signed off by the Mineral Planning Authority. They're not there.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. What do Rutland County Council say when you ask them why the conditions are not being enforced?
The response was they would ask Mick George what was going on, and then some time later we asked were they with it, where they are with their investigations, and we were advised that they would get the enforcement officer to deal with this as a matter of some urgency. They wanted to make sure that this was hit on the head right at the beginning. As of yet, we haven't seen any report from the enforcement officer. We've been notified today that there is a meeting with the operator, Mick George Limited, scheduled for next week. This is now going into late April, early May, some 2-3 months after the actual breach had occurred. Thank you.
Thank you. That is time for questions. And once again, Mr. Hodson, can I thank you very much for your deputation. I'm sure you will find in the debate that the issues are being raised by my colleagues. Not at all. Thank you. Bye. Okay. As you are aware, we are following an agenda, and this particular item is the first substantive item. However, we do have other items to go through, so I will do that first. Number 6, did we have any questions with notice from members?
None received, Chair.
Any notice of motions?
None received, Chair.
And any matters referred to this committee?
Nothing received, Chair.
Thank you. So can we please move to item 9, Minerals Authority Contract Update Report. We have all received the report. We have also received a copy of the last report that went to Growth Infrastructure and Resources Scrutiny Committee that existed prior to the reorganisation, and to the audit report. Am I right to assume, Councillor Stevenson, that as Councillor Powell can't be with us, there isn't any portfolio holder introducing this?
Very loosely, in that I was going to hand over to officers, because I'm aware quite a lot of this is technical, and I'm also aware some questions came through this afternoon, and I believe officers may well do a written response if they aren't covered off this evening.
Are we happy for that, members? Yes, in which case, is it you, Mr. Ransom?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Chair. The report sets out a request, has been produced following a request from members for to review the contract monitoring that's been put in place. The contract was awarded prior to meeting in Scrutiny in 2022, and that's referred to in that. The contract itself, as is set out in paragraph 2.2, covers effectively technical advice on planning policy to support the preparation of the local plan, with a clear indication about timely advice to coincide with the production of the plan. And then it's about the provision of development management advice and that includes the site monitoring of planning conditions. It does not include the enforcement of planning conditions. The enforcement of planning conditions still sits with Rutland County Council based on the outcome of site monitoring visits. That is a point I've actually made clear to Rutland Quarry Forum previously, but they don't seem to have taken account of. Hopefully that explains the scope of the work that's been put in place. In terms of how we're monitoring that, 3.1 sets out the structure for that. So we have a process. So we had a startup meeting when the contract was put in place. We have project meetings that happen on a quarterly basis to review the contract, and we receive a monthly update against the performance indicators in line with the contract. The contract itself was issued to all members in March last year after scrutiny, and that included all the performance indicators within that contract. So clearly members will have changed since then. So if you haven't got access to that contract and you wish to see the performance indicators, yeah, we can make those available to you. Generally speaking, in terms of planning policy, the provision of the advice and guidance has been in line with the requirements that we've set for delivery of the local plan and the work that's been done so far. So that is really consisted of supporting the preparation of the issues and options document for consultation, receiving the responses back from that consultation, and now preparing the next stage for the next stage, which will be the preferred options consultation that will come out later in the year. Similarly, within the contract, there are requirements to provide timely advice for decision making on planning applications, to make sure that the council sits within the time requirements for processing those planning applications unless extensions of time are agreed within it. On the site monitoring progress, there is a programme agreed at the start of the year looking at all sites that require site monitoring within them in terms of the number of visits per year. And up until February, that was going okay to track, but there were 3 visits that were due to take place before the end of March that did not take place because of changes of staff. As you will see from the previous report as well, you know, there is a national issue of a shortage of minerals planning officers, and that is probably even greater in the East Midlands as such. And so, you know, that we recognise all the way through that the fragility of that part of the process. And due to those staff changes, those 3 monitoring visits that should have taken place before the end of March did not take place. And then the report goes on to say that you know, the intention was to try and complete those by April. 1 has taken place, 1 is booked in, and the 3rd is awaiting owner's agreement to visit the site to confirm the date. So we haven't got a date confirmed for that. The other elements of the contract in terms of performance indicators has been delivered on time. Clearly, there's been an underperformance on the delivery of the site monitoring because of the staff changes that happened towards the end of the last financial year. The contract itself, as you'll see later on, in terms of alternative options, does give the authority the opportunity to terminate that contract if there is a material or a persistent breach of this contract. The officer's view at the moment was obviously that disappointment. It's disappointing that that performance indicator wasn't achieved. There are mitigating reasons for that, and there was a you know, program put in place to get the program back on track within the first month or 2 of the new financial year. And on that basis, our view is that that doesn't constitute grounds for contract termination at the moment. You'll see above, in terms of resilience of service, as I've mentioned, it's been a challenging year. You know, it's not, I don't think that's just the case for Northamptonshire. That's the case for minerals planning authorities across the country. And obviously we're trying and push some of those gaps by reskilling and upskilling our own staff to work alongside of that. My colleague Mr. Johnson can let you know the details around that. So hopefully that gives you some background, and explains where we are at the moment.
Mr. Ainsley.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Rinson. I'm slightly baffled, actually, as the enforcement authority, not much enforcement seems to have taken place at all. So we know Greatham Parish Council have notified of 7 potential breaches of the contract, and that RCC were notified. Now, 2 things strike me. One is that the quarry operator seems to be operating with impunity if they feel that they can drag out a hedge contrary to the breach of contract. And secondly, surely I would have expected some kind of investigation to be undertaken by Rutland County Council as the enforcement authority. So why hasn't that happened? Or has it happened and we haven't been notified?
Yes, please, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, councillor. The council has undertaken a recent investigation into the breach of the hedge, and it's only in the last day really concluded its position on that, and we haven't had a chance to notify the parish. The fact is that there has been a hedgerow. It hasn't been removed. It's been reduced to about 1 foot in height. It is in breach of, I think it's condition 60 of the planning permission, in particular, which relates to protecting nesting birds. The assessment that we take is one of harm, in line with our enforcement policy. If there's demonstrable harm, then we take enforcement action. In this instance, the condition did say that no work should be undertaken between February and September. And if there was works, that it had to be agreed with an ecologist, and that had to be submitted to the council. The applicant did discuss with their ecologist. It wasn't submitted to the council. They then proceeded to remove the hedge. The advice that I've had, having speaking to colleagues at Leicestershire County Council that do our ecology work, is that actually the removal of the hedge within February wouldn't be an issue for nesting birds. Their main concern would be if the hedgerow had been removed between March and September. That's when there would have been a problem. So on that basis, whilst there has been a breach, there's been no significant harm, so it's not expedient to take any enforcement action. What would we enforce? Effectively, we could only enforce, they've not removed the hedge, so all we could do is allow the hedge to regrow, and we've granted planning permission for the removal.
Mr. Ainsley.
It seems to me that the quarry operator is acting with impunity. I mean, I accept what your arguments are, but surely at the very least, a stern letter to the effect that you cannot flout the rules and regulations because you consider them to be immaterial. You need to go through the proper courses of action. That surely should have happened. And I wondered, why hasn't that happened? And why isn't it happening now?
So we've had discussions with the applicant, and they are aware that they're under significant scrutiny, not only from us, but obviously from the Quarry Forum and the Parish Council as well. What they have done is they have done at their own risk. Like I say, our enforcement policy is that we look at harm. If there is harm, so the other conditions that have been breached relate to no development taking place until certain information is provided. As they've just chopped down the hedge, and effectively a farmer can chop down the hedge without requiring planning permission, there hasn't been anything that we can enforce. If there was ongoing issues, noise, dust, things like that, or they were continuing to implement that permission without submitting the details that were required by condition, then yes, we would serve an enforcement notice, and it would be reasonable to do so. But in line with our policy, our own enforcement policy and national guidance on enforcement, and the fact that our own ecologist has said that actually February is okay for the reduction of that hedgerow, it would be unreasonable for us to take enforcement action. So I totally appreciate the point, and yes, they have breached it, and we have told them that, you know, they're under scrutiny and it's not helping us and it's not helping them themselves. I've told them that many a time. If they had breached any of the other conditions in such a way that it was causing harm, then we would look to enforce. And we've spent a lot of time with the parish and the Quarry Forum and with our consultees at not only Northampton but also at Peterborough, in order to ensure that there are far stricter conditions on in particular the northwestern extension to Greetham Quarry, but also we're looking to use those on other quarries going forward, because a lot of our quarry permissions date from 20, 30 years ago. So conditions have moved on, and we are looking to make sure that we are moving towards tightening up our restrictions far more than what they've ever been before.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I can't help. I'm going to let this drop, but I can't help but feel that you're basically a toothless tiger. I mean, that's what's happening here, that the developer decides, or the quarry managers decide that they're going to chop down a hedge, and actually, because it's February, none of the rules actually matter. So therefore, and you've decided that you're not going to take any further action. I think it's a principle here, isn't it? That if they're going to flout the rules and regulations and actually ask you to investigate post-event, because that's the other significant factor here, isn't it? They'd already done it, flouted the regulations, and then you're asked to investigate. They need to be told in clear, uncertain terms that if there were a second breach, no matter how minor, that, you know, enforcement action would be taken. I think that's
I think the only point I'd come back on that is that if we do take enforcement action, again, we have to meet relevant tests for that. If not, the applicant can appeal against that enforcement notice. My point in this instance is there's a planning permission to remove the hedge. The condition was only there to protect nesting birds, and our own ecologist has said that there wouldn't have been nesting birds at that time. They also took ecological advice. So the part of the breach was that they didn't send us that advice before they undertook their work. Had they done that, then they wouldn't have been in breach. I think they got on with it straight away. My own summation is because if they'd sent it to us, they would have then entered that season, and there would have been more risk of birds being there. That doesn't mean it's right, but that's what I believe to be the case.
I think we have a lesson to learn from this, and that is that the conditions we impose are defendable conditions, so that when they are breached, we can do something about it. And if the advice you are now getting says that we protect hedges from March to September, then in future, that's what it needs to say rather than February to September. So I think it's just, well, it isn't unfortunate they breached it. It was a breach. It was quite clear what the condition was, but it was unfortunate that our condition wasn't watertight in the first place. Councillor Beggy.
I've got a number of questions, but I just wanted to finish off on that one. I understand what you're saying, Justin, but we are aware of this operator. A breach is a breach regardless. It's the thin end of the wedge with some of these operators. We just have to be very, very clear with them that this will not and cannot be tolerated, because as far as they're concerned, they pushed the envelope and have in some ways got away with it. Well, what is the next? So they need to be very clear that we're keeping a very, very close eye on them. And I don't want to go stray too far away from today's subject, which is looking at the report. But obviously I'll be interested as well as when was the monitoring visit done for the wolf ox and the breach of condition about their lack of restoration on the Bullymoors quarry.
Sorry, Councillor, because I don't have all the information before me. I think there was,
One done in July, I think.
I think I think July or September, there was an investigation.
Yeah, that's right. You might not know the answer. It only sprung to my mind now about the Wolf Fox restoration, but if we could make a note that you could maybe give me a written reply about what's going on with that and how we're going to enforce that restoration, because we know we have an issue with restorations full stop in those quarries. So we just need to keep on top of that. So I'll go back, I'll let other members speak, then I'll go through my questions.
Any other questions from other members? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just going back to the hedgerow. I mean, it's well known in the agricultural world that 1st of March and 30th of September is the date that you're not allowed to do anything to a hedge to protect the nesting birds. But it sounds like what they did was coppicing, and coppicing could include cutting it off at ground level, which then allows it to regrow. We do need to be really strict, because they will come back and say, oh, we've coppiced it, and then start using it as some sort of entrance and try and get around it that way. So if there's nothing wrong with coppicing, but we've got to make sure that if they do coppice it, the condition is so strict that they can't just do something else with it.
Thank you. Another lesson. Mr. Beggy, do you want to come back?
It's nobody else.
Oh, Mr. Lambert, didn't see you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's reference in here to potentially upskilling our own staff. Could you give us an update on where we are with this? And is there potential for outsourcing the services ourselves if we've got the staff in-house in Rutland County Council?
If I pick up the upskilling of staff. So what we've been looking to do is involve our planning officers more directly and more involved in some of the discussions with applicants' agents around the sites, whereas in the past that's been left to Northants to deal with directly. So myself, up until recently, a colleague, Nick Hodgett, was heavily involved with the quarries, and I'm just upskilling as well. Nick Thrower, who's another one of our principal officers. Unfortunately, Nick Hodgett has recently retired, and the enforcement officer for the council, who has been previously heavily involved in the monitoring of these sites, up until I think it was a few years ago, when there was actually handed over to a colleague who's now left Northants that was very aware of things. So what we're trying to do is bring get more of other team involved in those meetings and discussions. And also what we're looking at doing is developing our own. So we've got Northants that go out and monitor the sites and check against the conditions, but also what I'm trying to introduce is a format, so that, because we've had this issue with the restoration recently again with being met, keeping a more up-to-date log ourselves of when conditions are coming up to their time limits, so that we can be a bit more proactive in that and not just having to wait until a monitoring visit's due. So there's a number of things. There's also relevant CPD courses and things like that that we're investigating, sending people on. So we haven't done as yet, but I think there is a minerals CPD event up and coming later this year that hopefully we'll send a couple of the team on as well.
Just to add to that, obviously, the focus of the community is quite often on the development management and the monitoring side of it. But in terms of the contract, the bulk of the cost to the council is on the planning advice in terms of supporting the local plan. And we're in a similar position, really, that we're still reliant on Northamptonshire because they have the expertise and support other authorities in terms of doing that. We're gaining in knowledge as we get involved in this more, but we're not in a position where we can replace that advice that we get from them in terms of policy development.
Before I bring Mr. Beggy back in, does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Bull?
Well, just one question on that. I think we are aware, going back many years, this whole area of expertise hasn't been particularly satisfactory. You know, the person going off to Australia and all the rest of it. How quickly could we establish this expertise within this council? Because yes, £25,000 for that particular area of the contract is not a huge amount, but there is a well-known saying that the cost is not the price you pay, and obviously there's a break clause within this contract, and yes, okay, I guess for the moment we have to stay with it, but the way I would be working on this and taking the level of quarrying that we have within this county for many years hence, and we know the big areas we're talking about, I would, and I'm looking at the leader, I would be, if it were my business, I would be looking to bring this in-house. And if we had that area of expertise, because you're saying there's a severe shortage, perhaps nationally, that area of expertise can be contracted out to the benefit of this council. And it's all about efficiency, running an efficient operation which is not dragged down, because I think what we're really saying is the contract for monitoring, etc., falls to us, and we don't have that area. So it does seem to me there is a pretty good reason for a radical overhaul and a firm management input and you can do a paper very quickly on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want me to reply?
Yes, please.
It sounds good on practice, isn't it? But in terms of resource, you again put in a lot of, you're putting resource into a small number or one or two people, and then the state of the market at the moment is that there's no guarantee that you'll hold on to them if you keep them. And just a word about the lady from Australia. Her background was that she worked in Northamptonshire for about 10 years before going. And her background was actually in policy matters essentially, and it worked really effectively from our point of view, because you do the work, send it to her overnight, and it'd be on your desk the following day. So actually, don't underestimate the power to actually work long distance on certain aspects of minerals. It works better on the policy side than obviously it does if you need to come and see sites. There are no easy answers about this, but I fully agree with you. Our approach, our joint approach, I think, for the planning service is to try and grow our own. We've put a lot of time and effort into trying to bring trainees on because of the state of the market. For planning courses, planning staff anyway. So, we're up to a consideration for that. But to make that switch is quite a difficult one to do. And it, again, just an urge, a bit of caution on that. That a lot of the contract for the next 4 years is around the local plan. So to make a change within that and lose that continuity as we go through that process, we have that contract in place at the moment. Now, I'm not saying the other aspects of it aren't important around that, and that's why, in some respects, we're taking the approach we're trying to do about develop our own expertise. But to make a dramatic change, unless there's a good reason to do that within the contract, is a difficult thing to achieve. And it's sometimes a question, be careful what you wish for, because you then put in your own eggs in a small number of baskets. And the state of the market, and as Northamptonshire have found, somebody will move somewhere else if there's a better paid job, whether that's in private sector or in another authority. That is the market we're working in around that.
Thank you. I think we are all aware of the difficulties of recruitment, not just in this area, but a number of other areas, because it's true across quite a lot of local government. But if the job you are offering is sufficiently interesting, challenging, well supported, and the individuals see opportunities for career enhancement within your authority, you will recruit and you will keep. And as we noticed last week when we were looking at the staff survey within Rutland. An awful lot of our staff who were responding to it have been in place for 4 or more years. So we don't, in many parts of the council, we don't have an incredibly rapid turnover. The point about changing horses in midstream, we all understand, but you can't do something quickly. You do need to plan for change and look at a route map to get from where you are now to where you want to be. And maybe it is 4 years hence. But I think one of the problems that we perceive as members is that we've for too long waited until it is too late, waited until a contract is about to be renewed before we think about the next steps. Those are my comments. I apologise, Nick, if I've stolen your thunder there.
No, I at these meetings, I tend to read out lists of questions. I'm quite glad when people tick some off my off my list. And thank you for Roger. You did answer some of these, that's why I sent them in advance. So I'll just go through some of them. The first one is not a leading question anyway. I just want clarity because I didn't quite. Who keeps the revenue from the monitoring visits? Is it Northants?
Yeah, the way the contract works is there's 3 elements to it. So there is effectively a fixed price for the delivering the local plan.
Yeah.
On development management, it works on an hourly basis. So it's, you know, if they don't do the work, they don't get paid. It's to reflect the amount of time that's done in terms of planning applications. On site monitoring, it is the site monitoring fee gets paid directly.
They get that money, not us.
Whether it breaks even or not, I don't know.
No,
It's not a great amount of money for it. And,
I think it was about between 500 and 800.
It's a bit less than that, I think. Yeah, last time I looked, it was 400, but I'm not up to date with the rates, so they may have changed.
I just wanted clarity on that.
Yeah.
Again, you may or may not have this information at hand. It'd be interesting to know how many site monitoring visits have been made to which quarries, and more to point is, what were the outcomes? Have any issues been picked up, and how does this number compare with the schedule which was agreed at the contract kickoff?
Yeah, we'll need to check that and get it up to date because of what's happening in terms of up to date.
Okay, if you could, because it would be good to report back to the forum, but also to the individual parishes.
Before you go any further, sorry to interrupt, could we make sure, please, Clark, that the information that Mr. Ransom and Mr. Johnson are going to come up with after this meeting is circulated to all members of the committee? Thank you.
Thank you. I think you covered off about the breach of contract, but it would be interesting to know, as you say, how many visits were done. And I understand that the monitoring visits are only a small part of the contract, but I just want to reiterate that it might be a small part of the contract, but it has a huge implications for our residents. And going back to what my learned friend Ken was saying, that if we need to try and bolster that area internally to make sure that our residents aren't jeopardized in any way, I would put a recommendation forward that is seriously looked at. I understand what you're saying from the policy side, Roger, that you're very happy, but it seems the development control side, we are struggling and having issues which has knock-on effects on our residents.
I think that's fair comment. I wasn't particularly happy about the late notice that we were given about the fact that the last 3 hadn't been undertaken, and we pushed hard to get those done as soon as possible in the financial year.
That's why I think
initially within the financial year, but
I think it's very key that we keep on top of Northants and to make sure that they're doing what they are supposed to be doing, particularly with what's been going on. Part of that contract is NNC have reported they've been having meetings with the operators, etc. Again, for due diligence, have RC seen evidence of these meetings and the minutes from them?
So I don't think it's always necessarily minuted meetings. We've been copied in on various email trails, been included in some of the meetings as well, and been also given updates through the monthly update reports that we get from the Northants as well. So we are kept abreast of them, and like I say, there are a number of those meetings that we've been involved in directly ourselves as well.
Okay, just for clarity, I know you said the contract is in 2 parts effectively, your policy side and the development control side. Does development control side fall under you, Justin, or is, and then policy under?
Yeah,
So you're keeping an eye on that development control side and Roger on the other?
yeah.
Okay,
And
cool.
then the monthly reports and the quarterly review meetings we hold with them are done jointly and involve Scrutiny as well as part of it.
Thank you. The staffing situation, which you have no control over, and hence why I think we need to look at it ourselves, is a concern. Just a matter of interest, do we know how many of the staff who were named in the original tender document are still there?
That's a good one. The 2, 3 are definitely there. 2 aren't. There's one that's come and gone since then, and then there's one new one that's come.
And are the current NNC staff, in your opinion, qualified for their roles? Because I know for a fact one of them turned up, I think, at the Quarry Forum and said he'd taken responsibility for this area, but he had no minerals experience.
That recently.
I suggest it was when would the last meeting have been? If it wasn't the last meeting, it was the meeting before.
I'm not sure who that is.
I don't know who
I
that
can
was.
find out
Yeah.
from my learned colleagues from the forum
I think-
and forward it on to you.
I think,
But are we happy with the experience of that team
I
currently?
think certainly one of the members of staff that they've got on board at the moment helping with this is very experienced in terms of background. I think they may, a professor at Oxford, and I think also done work for the National Infrastructure. So
you are comfortable with the experience of that?
Yes.
Of that team?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One of the big issues that vexes me the most is the smart objectives. I know that the contract was circulated by Roger on the 11th of March last year, but there was no mention of those smart objectives within it. So is that something you're going to give us sight of? And
They were in one that came in March, right towards the end. I'll send it through to you again. And
okay, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at it here and I couldn't
Okay.
find them.
They are.
This is the PDF
yeah,
from-
they're probably right at the back of the terms and conditions. We go to page 45.
Hang on, let me just type in page 45.
Make sure I'm in the right place. Actually.
Enter 45.
46 towards bottom contract performance indicators.
Okay, I'll look at that offline. Now you point out, so it's on page 46. Okay. And you are comfortable that they have performed against those?
Apart from the
Apart
site
from
monitoring.
site monitoring. Okay, great. What was also recommended back in February is that places will undertake a 6-month review and then report back to cabinet. Did that happen?
No, and I don't know why that hasn't happened. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But again, it just goes back to, I think we just need to,
Yeah.
as with operators and NNC, just keep on top of it.
It may be my misunderstanding. I thought something was coming back to scrutiny rather than cabinet, and it was.
I just referring back to the notes from last year. We've talked about resilience, upskilling we've spoken about. One thing which has been a lot of recently is discharge of conditions. What involvement do NNC have in the discharge of conditions?
It depends on what the conditions are and who's asked for them. They would usually have some input, but not necessarily always. We would usually go to whoever's requested them and whoever's got the technical background to respond to them. So if it's noise and dust and things like that, then whilst Northampton may have some involvement in it, it would primarily be our colleagues at Peterborough in the environmental health section.
Craig and Co. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Again, just to get a sense about how the contract is working, obviously there was an anticipation from NNC at the beginning about how much work was going to be involved. How has that met with reality? Have we swamped them, or has it met expectations?
On the policy side, it's quite a well worked out program anyway. So I think they've been aware about what we want to do along every step along the way, and they've they've delivered, as I said in my introductions, to time on all those aspects.
Yeah, I think on the planning side of things, I think mostly, we've been about in line with what we said we would be.
Okay.
Might be a little over it,
But we've
but
not
we're not-
overly swamped.
not massively over, no.
So just actually going back to one of my original questions, which we got sidetracked a bit, is within these monitoring visits, have we been picking up any issues or breaches?
Yes, there have been points that have been picked up, and quite often what has happened is Northants will initially write to the operator and saying they've identified these points. If they address them, then fine. If not, they will then pass it on to
Okay,
us.
so, but that wouldn't be an enforcement role, so to speak. It would be advisory.
That's the initial stage of any enforcement action.
Yeah, because we do the enforcement.
Yeah.
So it falls under our enforcement policy.
Yeah, so what their Northants are doing as the initial part of that, which is to say there's clearly something that you're not doing in accordance with the conditions, put it right now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will get Rutland to take enforcement.
Are those issues and actions recorded?
Yes, they'll be recorded in the monitoring reports that are done. So all of the points that have been raised in the monitoring are there's a checklist that's done for all of the conditions.
It would just be useful, as I have most quarries on my ward, particularly some of the quarries like Clipsham, etc., and the new quarry when it comes up, to understand what has been picked up and what has been done, so I can show the individual parishes the work that has been undertaken, because a lot of what you do sometimes doesn't get seen either.
Yeah.
So it would be good to be able to see both sides of that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Both sides of that coin. I'm nearly there. Yes, so enforcement is us, that falls under our enforcement policy, not theirs. Communication in February was stated that this would be improved with NNC, who would have access to our planning portal. Does that happen?
Sorry, is that on your list of questions?
No, it's one I added on.
Oh, sorry. Look, I was just trying to.
Not to try and slip it under the radar. It was an iterative document.
Okay, sorry, can you just?
But basically, back in February, we were going to. It was agreed that in order to try and improve communications, etc., with NNC, we would give them access to the RCC planning portal.
So I will need to double check whether that has been set. They have access to view all of the planning applications documents and things like that. What I can't confirm is whether they provide their response directly through our portal.
It'd just be interesting though. I don't expect you to answer it now. It was a late submission.
What I would say on that point actually is that given the scale of usually the responses that we get from Northants that can be many pages long, our portal isn't always the easiest thing to use for that, but I will give you an update and let you know whether they're registered.
Thank you. That's all my guys. All I just want to reiterate is that at the end of their breach is a breach, and we rely on planning, development and enforcement to protect the guys around the villages around these quarries. So as I say, anything we can do to bolster those resources outside of policy to protect our residents, I think is key, and hopefully I'll be here after May to carry on badgering you.
Thank you, councillor Beggy.
Thank you.
Do any members of the committee have any other further questions? Well, I've got a couple that I'm going to ask Mr. Brown before I bring in Mr. Gordon Brown, who I know is patiently sat there waiting to come in. My first question to you gentlemen is, we have had a situation for some time where the monitoring visits haven't been happening. And the monitoring visits are important because they're the first stage in enforcement where there are breaches. And our residents care about that. Have you been informing the portfolio holder about these not happening, these monitoring visits?
It's only since the end of February that they've not been happening to the programme. I think we have informally informed the portfolio holders that check the minute meetings we have whether aren't they are at the top of it.
I thought I read it had been a problem previously, and that was one of the reasons why there was a concern about this particular authority winning the contract again.
I can only talk about it in the context of this contract, and since this contract, I've made sure that we've put in place an agreed programme of monitoring visits and tried to keep those on track. What
Okay.
happened under the old there's a whole issue about the fact that we didn't monitor the whole of the contract previously. So it is a more general issue, I think, of not being on top of managing that contract in an effective way, rather than the specifics about monitoring visits.
Thank you. And my second question is, you say in the report in paragraph 6.1 that something will happen if there is a material or persistent breach of contract. What would you say would be a material or persistent breach?
I think of failure to deliver over a period of time against the performance indicators.
So no monitoring visits in the first quarter of the contract is neither material nor persistent then?
I would, it's difficult to be specific about it, but the issue this time was knowing what has happened and how quickly that was being remedied through that. So it'd be a question, I think, rather trying to go through the process of what you're saying, really. Why hadn't those visits taken place, and what was the process for remedying them? If there wasn't a clear indication that why that had taken place, or that wasn't remedied, then we could move on around it. It may well be, if they couldn't deliver part of the contract, we would terminate part of the contract if they couldn't provide a development management staff. But obviously, if you're making a decision like that, then it's really important to also think about having the alternative plan proposal to how you'd address that. So you put him on the spot in terms of saying what would happen, but I would need to look at it on the circumstances of the case and understand why that was the case, and then what was the alternative, or what would be put in place, and how that could be remedied if that was before going forward. But clearly, we do all that on the basis of legal advice. In my
Speak up. I'm just completely losing this.
I do sympathise with you, gentlemen. Perhaps Mr. Ransom could speak up a little when he's answering, but I have to say, having sat where you are at a planning meeting the other night, it didn't really matter who was speaking. It is actually quite difficult to hear in that part of the room. So I don't think Mr. Ransom is any more at fault than anyone else. I speak up always, but only because of my previous life as a school teacher, and I just got into the habit.
My apologies. I probably wasn't speaking directly into the microphone anyway, but more directly to the chair.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to have a few questions this evening. I am getting worried, I must admit. I'm being my last meeting. I'm starting to sound like Ken Bull when I start this particular question. When I was in business, no, it's to do with the SMART objectives. I'm looking at page 46, 47, and I honestly didn't recognize those as SMART objectives. To me, they are not specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. They seem to be very general, a wish list rather than very clear objectives, certainly from my point of view. And that's why, in looking at this document, I looked at it and said, well, I wonder where the SMART objectives are, because they're certainly not here. And I make that point in the sense that, I would like to see much stronger, clearer objectives, and those being measured and how they be measured, when they be measured, and that's not clear. And we've got 4 pages of measures which they are delivering, and we've only got 5 items which we're measuring. And I think that, to me, that doesn't feel, I don't feel comfortable about it, I think, is the way I do. So I'd ask you to maybe have a look at those in some more detail, to make sure that you are monitoring the objectives or the performance that's required through each of the elements in the previous pages, and making sure that those are monitored and evaluated on a regular basis. I think also the numbers are very general. 60% and 80% are very sort of loose in my view. And I have to say I've seen these in the highways department before, where we have got objectives of 90%, and every year we achieve 90%. You go, it's not an objective, you achieve it every year. You certainly want to be cranking up that performance year on year. So that's my first point on the SMART objectives. My next point is looking forward. And this is the one that I think I am concerned about. We've probably got one of the largest applications for minerals extraction coming up in the next, it's going to be delivered to you, I think, in the next 9 months, and that's for the Ketton Quarry. Very extensive extension there. And I'm particularly concerned about that because it's a major application with significant issues for the residents of not just Ketton, but Normanton and Edith Weston. And I'm worried that if we really have the capacity for that as we move forward. So I leave that one sitting there, but I really question you on that. I would certainly hope that members will monitor this very closely in the next 12 to 18 months, because it'll be quite important whether there is sufficient capacity within NNC and within Rutland County Council for minerals. That then brings me back to a bit that I was a bit concerned about with Mr. Johnson when he was talking about the CPD and the development of people. I took it from when we sat here last February that CPD would occur during last year. I get the impression that development of our own staff has not yet happened, and we're looking to be happening later this year. That does worry me, and particularly since we've lost Mr. Hodgett, who had a great deal of experience in minerals planning, maybe not a minerals expert, but he'd been involved in it quite extensively over the years. And that worries me that we're maybe not pushing forward with enough training for our people. And CPD to me is a day here and a day there, and it's not really intensive enough for our officers. And I just note that we have money put aside on the local plan. I won't go into the details of that. I've done that often enough in this room, but we have the money put aside for local plan. And I just wonder whether we should be just raising the skills of our existing staff. And we have some very good planners in the department, and making sure that they've got the skills required and doing that earlier rather than later, particularly with the Ketton application coming forward. So those are the key points. And then finally, I think there's another issue, and that's, I think you mentioned it earlier, and that is that the conditions laid down for Greetham are now going to be the basic standard for the authority moving forward. And I think it might be useful that was turned into maybe not a supplementary planning document, but certainly guidance for quarry operators coming forward with applications in the future. Thank you.
Just
Mr. Ransom, yes,
yeah,
please.
just on the performance indicators, the first one that you think is a bit waffly, that's the government standard for all planning applications, for major applications. So it's there to reflect what the government's expecting of the planning service for the county council.
Are you saying, Mr. Ransom, that it's a statutory requirement to put it in those terms? Or are you saying it is government guidance, which would therefore be a minimum for us?
The way the performance indicator is said, it's at least 60%, so it's set as a minimum, and yeah, that's the standard that applies to major applications, and that's deciding them within 13 weeks unless there's an extension of time.
So we could exceed, I think, is the point Mr. Brown is making, but of course that would be a cabinet or full council decision, not one for this committee. Mr. Brown, do you have any supplementary comments?
I just wonder if there's any comments on my other points I made from Mr. Ransom or Mr. Johnson.
No, I think Your point about future workload is really important, and that's why we have the quarterly meetings in terms of contract performance. So we will pick that up as part of that. It's not just Ketton. There's several others coming forward as well, but clearly Ketton is a major one with them. Ironically, it's a well-managed site, so from a monitoring point of view, it's been less of an issue. But equally, how we deal with planning application will be really fundamental.
I think we do need to be alert though, because we have historically had problems at Ketton, particularly around restoration, in elements of restoration, not in total. But I remember some angst about a public footpath at one point. Mr. Becky?
Sorry, yes.
Sorry, councillor Beggy, can you put your microphone on, please? Thank you.
I don't know if this is the forum, it just jumped into my mind, and once I've got Roger cornered, might as well make the most of it. While we're looking at planning policy and local policy and then tying that in with the Greetham conditions, could I suggest to ask you to look at the possibility of putting in policy I can't think of the word, I've lost it, got in my head, a buffer between quarries and PLDs?
I've referred to the Rutland Quarry Forum to the national guidance on this, which says that there shouldn't be an arbitrary buffer. You need to look at it on a site-by-site basis. So it doesn't lend itself to saying a figure within a policy, but clearly, you would want to see a buffer around it. But the guidance is you obviously need to look at, the gradient and the relationship of the site to other things to do it. So it means that you would normally look at a buffer on a site-by-site basis and therefore deal with it through the planning application process rather than trying to give an arbitrary figure with it in the policy. But I'm aware of the comments that have been made around that, and so we're still looking at that. But obviously, whatever goes in as a policy, we need to be mindful of national planning guidance around that and work within that as well.
Thank you. And a supplementary to that, which is not supplementary to, it's a different subject, but the changes in the particular regulations this week. Obviously, the conditions at Greetham were based on the old particulate regulations, just to ensure that they are factored in as well going forward, because they are now more stringent.
We would rely, as always, on our colleagues at Peterborough in terms of the expert advice with that. But yes, if that's the most up-to-date guidance.
No, absolutely. I'm sure Craig is all over it. But yeah, in my summary, I think one of my biggest recommendations is that we look to put a plan in place to increase the robustness of internal monitoring and enforcement, particularly with the growth in quarries in my ward and in Ketton and potentially other places.
Chair, sorry, can I just respond to Councillor Brown's points just on the training side of things?
Yes, please do.
I think when I originally made the comments, it was specifically about attending site visits and learning on the job with colleagues from Northants. What I am aware of and trying to look to do is there are some, as I've said, some specific particularly interesting courses for CPD on minerals waste that are coming up at the moment that we want to try and get some of the team on. But also I am considering the potential for us to put somebody on a course to do it, but again it's looking at the resources and feasibility of doing it to get somebody specialized in that. But I take on board the points that you've made and the need to build that capacity and knowledge sooner rather than later.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Just minor point, we have the potential for a very large income from the Ketton quarry application, and maybe we can use that money in advance to make sure we have the quality of people ready to handle that application.
Very good point, Mr. Brown. Okay, I think I would like to draw this discussion to a close, please. A number of points have been raised, and I would like to go through them one by one to see whether you are still content that they are relevant. They are, in fact, what if you agree them, what we recommend to Cabinet to consider. The first is that an independent review of performance of the minerals contract be undertaken with a report back to scrutiny within 6 months. Do we feel? Please do.
I might be shot down by some of my forum colleagues, but I think Roger and Justin have been very clear that there is issues with the monitoring and the enforcement side of things. My recommendation is just that there's a plan in put place to address that and increase the robustness and skills within that department. That would fix that gap, because they have openly admitted that there is an issue and a concern.
I take that on board. It makes sense. I was going to say, in light of the full discussion tonight, do we want to amend? So shall we simply not recommend to Cabinet, but recommend to the next overview and scrutiny committee that they review the progress on this contract within the first year of their existence?
I think the reporting regularity should be increased, and more visibility of some of these elements. So we have 100% transparency. I don't know how that would manifest itself. I think that's for development control to suggest about how they're going to increase the budget and transparency, and even make it specifically part of the portfolio holders.
You haven't got your microphone on.
There you go. And maybe even specifically, the minerals is actually specifically worded as part of a portfolio holder's responsibilities, because it is that important to the residents involved.
I think minerals is a part of a portfolio.
It is, but not. I'm saying
specifically.
specifically mentioned as part of that, as opposed to. But anyways, that's just my thoughts. Your chair.
I am asking if you want a recommendation around this, members. Mr. Bull.
May I just say, Madam Chairman, I think what Councillor Beggy is saying is actually quite relevant for this committee and indeed Cabinet to just have, if you like, a physical almost overview of what has happened in the past months. And I think if that could be, I think the information is available. So if it's set out in a readable format, in many ways, I think it will give some confidence to what has been happening, and hopefully if there are improvements required, then that can come. You may, members, be aware of ABC, and we are doing X, Y, Z. So I think what Councillor Beggy is asking for is quite relevant to actually just, if you like, historically monitor what's happened with the breaches, etc., and those being explained, which will then give confidence going forward that we are improving the system and the controls. That's as I see it, Madam Chairman.
All right, let me try again then. That this committee recommends to the future leader of the council that minerals is explicitly identified within a portfolio, and that the portfolio holder monitors the details of this contract and reports to scrutiny at scrutiny's request. I'm trying to summarize what you're saying to a recommendation, Mr. Beckett.
No, absolutely. And in part, I think that's absolutely right. I just want to ask if is the number of site visits, etc., and where is that confidential information?
Your microphone, please, and speak into it.
I'm not sure. We can certainly release it to members.
Because again, if we're
think,
trying to create confidence
yeah,
within our local residents, I know it can be released to councillors,
yeah.
but can it be a report that can be presented to the quarry forum to say, in the last period, we've done visits to X,
Yeah.
Y, Z,
I'm sure we can do that.
because that would give, I hope, a lot more
Yes.
reassurance and
Yeah.
about what is happening and the stuff is happening.
Had you got the wording, Jane? Right. In which case, add to it, and that information on quarry visits is regularly shared with the quarry forum. Jane, would you mind reading that back, please?
The committee recommends that the leader and the portfolio holder and the members receive a monthly overview report regarding the progress of the minerals waste contract and the monitoring visits, and details of the monitoring visits to be shared with Rutland Quarry Forum.
Not quite.
I would say monthly is.
Quarterly, I think.
Quarterly?
Quarterly?
Yeah.
Quarterly. Can I have a formal proposer, please? Thank you. Seconder, thank you, Mr. Bull. All in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, do you wish a recommendation along the lines of Cabinet review the SMART objectives? Cabinet consider the SMART objectives and develop them so that they are indeed smart. Would you like a recommendation along those lines? Yes, you got that? Proposer, please. Thank you, Mr. Bull. Seconder. Seconder, thank you, Mr. Beggy. All those in favour?
Thank you, Chair. Unanimous.
Thank you. And I think, notwithstanding the very encouraging words we've heard from our officers tonight, I personally think that we do need a recommendation pertaining to the standards. Now, initially, I had written that the planning conditions laid down for Greetham Quarry be adopted as the minimum standards for Rutland. I'm thinking that's not quite right. I'm thinking that it should be that the planning condition, let me try again, that minimum planning conditions such as those laid down for Greetham Quarry be adopted as the standard for Rutland. And the reason that I think I would like to slightly alter it is to take account of the points that were made about national changes and obviously own experience as well. So again, that would be recommended to Cabinet. Do we want that? Yes. Well, I'll propose it because I actually think it's important. Anyone second it? Thank you, Mr. Bull. All in favour? Thank you very much. One abstention. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm getting a bit carried away. Now, I would like to ask a question. I think we all, as residents and representatives of residents, feel that there should be a minimum buffer imposed, but totally accept what Mr. Ransom said in terms of the National Planning Policy Framework. I do wonder, though, whether there is an opportunity to explore the potential for having something in our policy that says along the lines of ordinarily we would expect a minimum of, but clearly each case will be taken on its merits. Is that a possibility, Mr. Ransom, legally speaking?
It's possible to refer to things like that within the text, but not within the policy itself. So you can say, you can set out generic expectations, if you like, within the text, but then the policy could be specific around that.
Okay. I think there are nods, and I'm not sure whether that's a recommendation or we just say to you, Mr. Ransom, please, can you expedite that? I'd like your response on that, please.
Well, it will, obviously what will go into the local plan will come through member consideration anyway. So, we will certainly look at it. I've said we'll do that anyway, in response to what the Quarry Forum, and, as you're aware, we'll got a plan for obviously, trying to inform members as we've been going through the production of the local plan. The next stage is a stage where we are inviting comments on it. So, there's still a way to go. One of the things I would think would be very good to look at is, once Cabinet is approved and perhaps alongside the public consultation is going in on the next stage of preferred options, there's another chance that stage really to try and shape policy and what's in the text by scrutiny having a role within that at that time. But before we get to regulation 19,
yes,
when obviously that becomes the final version of the plan, and at that stage it's really preparing a plan for submission, and therefore comments that come back are ones that then will go to and expect to consider. That's an approach we've done previously about scrutiny, looking at the plan while it's out for public consultation, and so potentially if we haven't delivered what the members want, there's still the chance to pick it up at that stage before we get to the next stage.
We can't direct what future scrutiny is likely to do, but those of us who are fortunate enough to be re-elected, I'm sure will want to pick this up. And given our current scrutiny structure, it seems to me that looking at the local plan in the way you describe is a single issue meeting, but not necessarily a formal meeting of the scrutiny committee. But we do have the facility to do that, don't we, Jane? So I would hope that gets picked up next time. So are we content that that's the way we will deal with the buffer? Yeah, jolly good. Did you want to raise any other recommendation, Mr. Beggy, around monitoring visits? Please.
I would like to get the Cabinet undertake to investigate the plan to improve mineral monitoring enforcement skills and review potential funding through local plan funds, monitoring visits and
Seconder?
Could you say that again with your microphone?
Has he done it again?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I will say this slowly and only once. Cabinet undertakes to investigate a plan to increase minerals monitoring and enforcement skills and review potential funding through the local plan funds, monitoring visits and planning fees.
Seconder? Mr. Bull? All those in favour?
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. I would like to apologise to those who are not in the chamber but watching this meeting, for those of us who keep forgetting to put our microphones on. It's not intentional to keep people in the dark. Genuinely, we forget. Thank you. Any other recommendation? No? Well, thank you very much. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And thank you very much for coming. I hope you feel, our deputies, that your issues were taken seriously by this committee and that we have some progress at least. Thank you. I'll wait a moment before continuing while those who are leaving leave. I'll give you a minute to go. Okay, changing tack completely now. Moving on to item 10, CQC inspection framework. And we're receiving an update, verbal update from Kelly McAleese. Kelly.
Thank you. So I'm here today to give an update on what CQC inspection will look like for adult social care, and also to update you on some of the progress that we've already made in adult services to prepare ourselves and to maintain a good standard of practice in social work, and also to go over a little bit about our aspirations and our aims moving forwards at this point. Thank you, Jane. Next one. So just to give a bit of background as to where the concept of inspection has come from, we weren't previously inspected. However, there was a change in legislation, and that came in, was enacted last year, and that gave the direction that CQC would be responsible for an independent assessment of local authorities. And that's specific regarding our delivery of our Part 1 responsibilities under the Care Act. So that covers quite a large amount of our responsibilities. It covers our responsibility to assess people, responsibilities for adults with support needs, as well as carers, as well as our responsibilities on safeguarding, and a lot of nuanced responsibilities around continuity of care and around the way we provide support for people specifically. So the assessment itself, when CQC begin, which they have done this April, so they started on April the 1st, that's when the responsibilities kicked in. They will focus specifically on 4 areas, and there are some similarities to the areas that they undertake inspection on for providers, but they have really reviewed their framework for inspection and tweaked it to make it more specific for local authorities and recognise the difference between the provider sector and the duties that we have under the Care Act. So they will look specifically at how we work with people. They'll look at how we provide support and what that looks like for people. They'll look at how we ensure safety and maintain safety in our systems. And they will also look at our leadership structures and our leadership qualities as an organisation. Thank you, Jane. So just to break them down just in a little more detail, we have 4 assurance themes, which I've just gone over, and they are specifically broken down into working with people. So that includes how we assess, how we care plan with people, how we review and our review responsibilities, how we support people to live healthier lives, and our preventative strategies and measures to prevent, reduce and delay people requiring support. And it also looks at how we support wellbeing and our information advice offer. It goes on to then look in more detail at how we provide support, and that also includes things like market shaping. It includes commissioning and how we personalise our commissioning offer for people. It includes our workforce capacity and the capability of our workforce, and that includes our regulated professionals and our non-regulated professionals. It also looks at integration and our partnership working, and it includes not just our partnership arrangements with health, but also the voluntary sector, the provider sector, and other services such as the police would come into that as well. It looks at ensuring safety, so that is broken down to our responsibility to lead on safeguarding inquiries. It looks at our ability to undertake reviews, safeguarding adult reviews, how our safeguarding adult board functions, and it will also look at our systems and continuity of care responsibilities. And lastly, it looks at culture under the topic of leadership. It looks at our strategic planning, our learning and improvement offer, our innovation, and that would include our commitment to research and creativity in practice. And it also looks at governance and our management structures and our sustainability. So within those 4 themes, they also have several specific statements, which I've just gone through. And all of this framework was actually co-produced. So when CQC developed this framework, they made sure that they did it in partnership with people with lived experience. So all of these areas that we will be assessed against have come from people's real experience of social care and what's important to them. So it was produced specifically with an agency called Think Local Act Personal, which is a nationally recognised body around giving people with lived experience a voice. Inspection will be through a variety of different measures. They will also be incorporating learning from our statutory returns. So they will have a focus on our performance through use of data. And that will be through our statutory returns, which we produce year on year, but also they will be interested in any local data and local intelligence that we produce. They will also require an annual self-assessment, and I'll go on to talk a little bit more about the test and trial that we've done of that and what that looks like. And they will also include an on-site inspection. So not dissimilar to Ofsted, they will be on site and they will want to see our practitioners working and speak to them and speak to management within the organisation and our key partners. It isn't just adult social care that is being inspected. The regime will also look at integrated care systems. At this time, we don't have clarity on what their framework of inspection will look like, but we suspect it will be informed by some recent reports that have come out, such as the Hewitt report, which has been recently published. It's not at the moment rumoured that it would be done in tandem. So there was some query about whether we would also be inspected around the same time as our integrated care systems, and it's not looking like that would be likely, specifically because they haven't released the framework for inspection for the ICSs yet. And to reiterate, there's a real focus in our inspection regime on how we evidence people's outcomes and how we evidence that we've supported people to the best of our ability to improve their outcomes as much as we're able to. And that is because of the strong ethos around co-production that runs through the framework. Thank you, Jane. So just some of the methods of what they will take into account. I've covered a few of them, but they will want to hear feedback from people and their experience of working with adult services. That may be through interviewing people and also through any kind of survey and customer feedback that we gather on a regular basis. They will want feedback from staff and our leaders to hear about how we support our practitioners, what our strategies are, what our aims and aspirations are as a service. They will want feedback from partners as well. They will be looking and doing deep dives into our policy, process and guidance that's available. They will also look at any kind of national survey that we undertake. They'll look at our statutory reporting. They'll look at any kind of activity we undertake, such as peer reviews. And they will look at any kind of national data set that's produced. They will be specifically focusing, and there's a big focus throughout the framework on outcomes. So it is about how we support people to achieve, but also how we evidence that in our practice. And one of the big pieces of work that is going to be required alongside any face-to-face inspection and any kind of analysis of data that CQC do is something called the Local Authority Self-Assessment and Information Requirements. That is the equivalent document of the self-assessment that Children's Services would do for Ofsted. At the moment, we've just completed a trial run of that document. It runs between 20 and 30 pages, and it's our ability to showcase what we believe we do very well and how we know we do well at it, areas we want to improve upon, and gives a bit of a pen portrait of who we are. So we've done a trial run through East Midlands ADAS, and the trial run, which we've only just had feedback in the last couple of weeks, was really positively received. We had positive feedback on our first attempt at that document. We've taken some learning away from it. We've had some comments, and we have a further meeting booked in to get more detailed verbal feedback from the reviewer who was commissioned by East Midlands ADAS externally to provide us with some themes. And that was a regional piece of learning. So all of the authorities in the region took part. So we also anticipate that we will get some themes from other authorities on what was particularly good, areas we might want to work together on to improve, so that we're producing really good local authority self-assessments. And of course, they will be on site, so they will do a face-to-face visit as part of the evidence as well. And just looking at the timeline, so we have entered into a period of inspection. It began on April the 1st. We have had it confirmed that we will not be inspected, so we're not expecting anyone to turn up in this period of time. What we anticipate is that their initial formal assessments, which have been confirmed within their website, will start in September. They are looking to start with initial formal assessments that will contribute to more thematic learning. So again, waiting for more information from CQC about exactly what that looks like, but they've confirmed we've got between now and September to continue some of the developments and the measures that we're putting in place to maintain our quality ready for inspection. Early 2024 onwards, that's when they're really going to start kicking in with their inspection regime, and we'll know more about what that will look like. So when we will be expected to produce our self-assessment annually, how they're going to use nationally reported data, what that will look like, and how we contribute to that. Thank you, Jane. So just to provide you with a bit of an update on what we've already done, and we have been working quite intensely to prepare for CQC readiness and now maintenance. We've taken quite a lot of measures to ensure that we have a really robust quality assurance function. That's been one of the main aspects. So by doing that, we have created a quality assurance team, and we've invested in specific roles, one of which is co-production lead. That's because we are aware that we want to strengthen our co-production offer. We want to create more groups and offer more opportunities for people that we support to provide feedback to us. We had relatively small numbers of feedback surveys completed. So one of our big pieces of work is also to make sure that we offer digital options for people to provide feedback to us. So the co-production role is really going to be focusing on that. We've also developed the structures within the team of 2 roles that are improvement officers, and they've taken a lead on certain projects, which I'll go on to talk a little bit about those work streams. And we've centralized a lot of our quality assurance activity within that team. So the learning from complaints, workforce development, learning from our use of data, and ensuring that we contribute to audits and improving our audit program. And all of that feeds into then staff development, system changes. So we've, for example, learnt that from staff feedback that we needed to improve our care and support assessment that we offer, so that it is a better option for people who are assessed, and also it's something that our staff find functional and helpful during that process. So as a result of that, we've made those changes and implemented a new assessment template, which we will then be reviewing to ensure that it's been successfully implemented. We've been undertaking a self-audit, and we've been doing that since last July, and that has been auditing ourselves against what we knew the inspection framework would cover. So the inspection framework provides us with a list of best practice, and we've been auditing ourselves against that and identifying areas that we might want to improve upon. And that has contributed towards projects and specific work streams. We have set up a CQC regulation board. That is our strategic management group who are in that meeting. And more recently, we've also set up a delivery group. So we will have strategic management represented, and we will feed into a delivery group to identify projects and work streams that might need to be undertaken. We have briefing sessions for staff monthly. That is to make sure that our staff are familiar with what's going on and we have a consistent message and communication with them. We've also had a peer review. So we had a peer review between December and March this year with Derby City Council, and that's provided us with some useful feedback on how we communicate our models of practice, our aims towards digital and improving accessibility for our community, and also our customer journey and how that looks when it's audited by an external practitioner from Derby. We've also had an audit from Welland, and that was on our CQC readiness. That received only low and moderate outcomes. So we had no areas of high risk or priority that we needed to identify. And a lot of those areas were about strengthening the governance of our CQC regulation board and creating a delivery group. So a group that was more doing the work and putting the actions in place. As I've said, we had our mock LASER, our local authority self-assessment, and that received positive outcomes. And we've also been attending several regional groups, and we've identified practice sharing and learning from our colleagues that are also in the same position as us and are learning and putting in place structures to support inspection. So just to go over some of our work streams, I've mentioned around digital. Digital is a real priority, and digital accessibility. One of the biggest work streams we've got is launching the portal for customer self-service. So that we're hoping will be launched towards the end of May. We've had a few teething issues with some of the systems, but it will be in place, and that will offer our community self-referral functions. It will also allow our partners in health and other services to make safeguarding referrals, for example. And we then hope to work towards more self-assessment options for people. It will be something that will be an intensive piece of work, which we'll need to keep on top of, but it's also going to be a positive step to helping people access support in a more accessible way that we've never offered before. It's not something that we've had in place. We have been looking as well at gap analysis around our policy, procedure and guidance. So we have several pieces of guidance in development. We've already launched pieces of guidance such as updated supervision standards. Case recording standards is due to be launched shortly. That will provide staff with clear expectations and standards of practice. And with every piece of guidance that we launch, it has a full CPD session that goes alongside it so that all staff are being given the same message. We've done some work on use of data. Because data is such a big focus in inspection, what we needed to make sure was that we connected data to learning. So we've done a full audit of all of the statutory returns that we undertake. We already had a good governance process in place for our internal data, but alongside that, we've put in clearer action plans and trackers so that we keep a track of any audits and any learning from our internal data. We are also improving our customer feedback offer. So we have a project officer who is leading on consulting with the community and local groups, asking them what kind of things they would want to feedback about how our practice is and how we perform. And we are looking to digitize that option to ensure that people can fill in more feedback, provide us with a better quality of learning, a better quality of feedback about how we do. And we are also focusing on workforce development. So we have a consistent training plan in place, but we've taken the learning from some of the sessions around, such as the peer review and some of the audits we've done. We've also consulted with staff about what they would like to have more training, more development on. So we're revising our training and workforce development offer based on that feedback, and we'll ensure that that is also connected to the quality assurance function we have now and learning from audits and feedback from people. And so just as far as what we're working towards, September, I mean, we've been working for quite a while towards it, but we're aiming for September, which is when we anticipate we could have an inspection. We're also working on learning from the LASER, the self-assessment. We want to take that learning on board and provide an updated template of what our self-assessment will look like so that we have a really strong basis for when we have to undertake the real self-assessment. We've still got actions that we're continuing to progress, such as the portal that I've talked about and the customer feedback, which will still be continuing on and will need review and development. We have got a mock inspection that is planned potentially for September. So that's a regional piece of learning similar to the pilot self-assessment we've just done. So we're also very keen to take any opportunity to test and trial how we are and how we're doing. We're continuing to await some further guidance from CQC. It will be important when we get the framework regarding how they'll inspect the integrated care systems. And that's something we'll do a piece of learning on when we get that report. And we're also continuing to invest in staff. We have had, as other departments have, some retention and recruitment turnover. So we're heading towards a very good position now in adult services. So that's giving us a really good opportunity to, as I've said, with workforce, revise our training and ensure that all of our staff have had the same quality of practice as they come into the organisation as new practitioners. So that's the position we're at now, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for that very thorough run through of the new inspection regime. And also you're talking about what you're doing as well beyond just what the regime is. I think we all appreciated that. It's given us all a much clearer idea. And certainly speaking personally, I'm quite confident that you'll be in a great place when the inspectors come in. Questions, Mr. Ainsley.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what the chairman just said. I thought that was a good presentation. Thank you. And I really have every confidence in the services that have been provided by adult services. Shame John's gone, really, isn't it? Yeah. In any case, I read the question. On slide 2, when we're talking about assurance themes, could you flick that up for me, please? There seems to be a departure from the people-based services and whole delivery support, and seems to be, what seems to me at least, in my ignorance, a deep dive into the murky world of finance rather than supporting people. And on slide 2, it simply says under the second assurance thing, the one before that, please. Oh, okay, maybe slide 3 then. Yeah, okay, 3, thank you. I didn't count the title slide. So providing support, then it says market shaping and commissioning. What on earth are you talking about?
So market shaping, and it's a good question. What they mean in the Care Act regarding market shaping is how we ensure the continuity and integrity of the care market. So by that, they would be looking at what we can do, and there is obviously limits to that, as to how we support our provider sector, also how we listen to the views of our community around how we shape, for example, any investment in voluntary sector or specific projects within the community. So they'll be looking at how we, what structures we have in place, such as we have a quality assurance officer role, we have a clinical care home coordinator role, who are there to support care homes and domiciliary care around information advice, training, that sort of thing. So that's the specific focus they mean by market shaping.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, but I'm still not very happy, to be honest, because we all know about the Rutland premium, you know, when we look at care services, primarily because it's the location to be, and we seem to be importing an awful lot of care homes, which does actually put quite substantial pressures on, fiscal pressures at the very least, on the people who want to come here. So when we talk about market shaping, it seems to me that whilst that's admirable, it certainly shouldn't be a prime focus, should it?
I think that I would hope CQC would understand some of the limitations, and that's why I think it's really important that when we do our self-assessment, it has the opportunity for us to provide a pen portrait of who we are as a county. And in the mock LaSare that we've just done, we certainly talked about the fact that we have our own unique challenges, and we do also see that perhaps lack of parity in the care provision sector through some of those bigger organisations and the various charging that's in place with those. So we're hoping that by making that really clear, when CQC do come in and they inspect us, they have a better understanding of some of our unique challenges, and that might include some of the differences we see in the provider sector.
Yeah, it'd be a nasty state of affairs, wouldn't it, if you were penalised for the Rutland premium? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't for one moment think we will get whatever the judgment of failing is going to be in this one. So I think if CQC do misunderstand, the overall report will be fine. And we as members who are here will know that there was absolutely nothing our officers could have done to stop that criticism if CQC choose to criticise. And I would hope that both future scrutiny and cabinet, if that were the case, would write a pretty stiff letter to CQC pointing out that they need to do their homework first. We have done it in the past, and I'm sure Councillor Stevenson will remember going back some of the letters we've written to Ofsted and the like. She's nodding, she does.
Yes, I'm going.
I think I just woke you up, didn't I?
I've been hanging on every word, particularly yours, Chair.
Other questions? Mr. Poole?
It's not so much a question. I will pick up on your word confident. I think we've had a very confident presentation, and I have to say that gives me the confidence that we are going in the right direction. I used to hold the portfolio for this whole area, plus adults, when the two portfolios we have now were mine alone. Do you have the resources really that gives you the confidence to go forward in the manner that we need? I know that's perhaps a little unfair question, but this is such a key demanding area. You know, you must shout if you haven't. If you're worried going forward, I think you've got to really bring that to the fore.
I think that we are in a lot stronger position because we've had real support in our senior management and through portfolio holder to invest in quality assurance. That wasn't something that the team didn't exist, and the function was minimal compared to what it has been over the last year. Equally, we've had a lot of support in being able to really invest time in our reform planning. And this at one point wasn't the only piece of reform we were planning for. We have had some workforce issues, as any authority has after COVID. The practitioners were tired. We did have some capacity issues with managing demand because we have also seen increased demand. We're getting to a better position now with recruitment. We're starting to fill some of our vacant posts. So I think that will give me a clearer idea on what resources might look like. It's been very unfair of me to probably make a judgment looking at the system because we have been down on some of our social work teams and our therapy functions. But we're getting back up to that. So I'm confident at the moment that we're in a good position. Give me a few months to analyse what it looks like with a completely stable workforce, and I could probably come back to you.
Okay, thank you. My only other few words of advice would be invest in good systems and keep on top of reviewing those systems, because when you come under strain, as every organization does, every setup does, it's the systems that give you that confidence. It's the systems that prevent you falling over the edge. It's the systems that bring things to your attention. And that's been my forte in business turnaround. So keep the good work up, but make sure your systems work for you now, and they need to be improved, because I'm afraid the bar is always going to be raised. But thank you very much.
For the benefit of members of this committee, it was in fact John Morley who suggested quite some while ago that we took a paper on becoming CQC ready. It got delayed for various reasons that I won't go into, because I actually can't remember now, if I'm honest. And of course, John has left us. You may wonder why we have not got the director, Kim Sorsky, introducing this. She has had booked in her diary leave for this week, and it was booked an awful long time ago, before we even knew we were going to have this on the agenda at this time. And I talked to Kim about whether it was postponed or not. And I think you'll agree with me, it was a good thing it wasn't, if we, potentially could be inspected in September. I think the strength in the department has been shown this evening with Kelly's presentation to us, that I don't think, without thinking about it, if you see what I mean, we would have even noticed that anybody was missing. And I think that's a credit to the entire leadership of social care, members in terms of portfolio holder and officers alike. So thank you very much. And if there are no further questions, I hope you enjoyed all the debate about minerals beforehand. Well, broaden your horizon and all that. But thank you very, very much for coming. And we'll obviously watch it with interest, because clearly it's an area that's of importance to us all. Right, now moving on from inspection that is going to be happening in the future to inspection that has happened in a very real way in the recent past, and that's the inspection of My Care. And we have Emma Jane, I think, introducing it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm Emma Jane Hollins. I'm a head of service in adult social care, and I've brought two of my very relevant colleagues with me today. So Tammy Thurley is our operations manager for community care services. So we manage all of the provider services that the council provide to our community. And more importantly, we've brought with us one of our coordinators, Sarah Savage, of My Care, to explain to you as well what exactly My Care is. And you've just heard from Kelly all about CQC inspection. We've just lived it. So we've just come to you to tell you how we got on and what it was all about. So thank you, Jane.
Oh, you have it then.
Yeah, I've got to probably share it so people at home can also see it. It's complicated, don't ask. Good to go.
Okay, so I just want to remind everybody that My Care's only been in existence for 18 months, 2 years. We brought it in as a trial. Many of you may have heard of the previous care provider service that we had as a council called Reach. And we looked around and we decided that actually we wanted to do something a little bit different. We didn't want to just provide time and task situations where somebody would say, right, we're going in at 8 o'clock, we're going to give you a shower, we're going in at 10 o'clock, we're going to do this to you. We wanted to look much more creatively at what people's support might look like. And My Care was introduced as a trial, very much looking at outcome focused support that actually looked at what do people want to achieve and how could we motivate and encourage people to achieve those goals and wishes rather than say, right, we're going to come and do this to you. So we really wanted to make it very, very important that people were able to live independently at home for as long as possible. And that's been our strapline all the way through when we've introduced My Care. We do operate 7 days a week. We do operate 24/7. We only do overnight on emergency situations at the moment, and that is something that we'd like to progress going forward. We would like to have a night team as well, because we know that that is an area in our community that is needed. Next one, Jane. So we absolutely have values at the core of our service, and the main one is keeping people and promoting and enabling that independence. We're doing support with people, not to people. People are very much involved in all of the decisions about what support they need, what support we can provide to them. We adapt and change to those needs. So somebody might come out of hospital with a very high level of package of support. And as we work with that person to encourage them to be more independent, obviously we tailor and adapt that support as we go along. We listen, and you'll see later in my presentation, it's a really important part of our service to actually listen to what people are telling us, and that we work flexibly and respond to how somebody wants that support. So we don't just assume that we're going to go in there every day. They might have family coming to visit, and actually they don't want lots of people coming in and doing all of that support. So we might have a break for a couple of days while family come in and they spend quality family time, and then go back in again when family aren't there. So we very much work flexibly. We integrate our care with health. So we work very closely with our health professionals, both our district nurses, our therapists, so that we can respond to both health and social care. We've done a lot of workforce development with some of our care workers, in that we can do some of the tasks that would traditionally have been done by a health service, actually with one visit, with one care worker going in, so there's not numerous people going in there. We link to voluntary sector, link to the local community. We know that people are wrapped around by their community, and we want to make sure that that comes through as well. Next one, Jane, please. So what do we offer? We've got 6 main pathways, we call them, the 6 main areas of support that we offer. We do the traditional reablement, which was the very heart of Reach when it was in existence, so that it's time limited, somebody coming out of hospital, or they might have had a fall. We look at a programme that is therapy led, so that we actually get people back on their feet again. We have something called safety net. Now, obviously, if somebody has long-term support, sometimes that might take a little bit of time to actually get that put in place. So we call it safety net. It's short-term care that we provide whilst that person's package is being resized or actually brokered out to our external domiciliary care market. We offer crisis response, and that's when I say we work 24/7. Our emergency duty line is available 24/7. We respond to any emergency within 2 hours. It's very often a lot less than that. And recently we've had a lot of calls from our health colleagues who might have gone out to somebody who's fallen, or there might be a carer who's been taken into hospital and the cared for needs some support at home, so they don't have to go in the ambulance and actually arrive in a hospital when they don't actually need to be there. We offer what we call D2A, that's discharge to assess. So when somebody's coming out of hospital, they might present very differently than after a few days when they've been back at home and they've got back into the routine of being in their own familiar environment. So we assess, we go in, we support somebody whilst they get back on their feet to look at what their long-term needs might be. If anything, it might be a period of reablement supports that person to become independent again and not needing that long-term support. We have a pathway that we call complex care. This might be where somebody who we're not quite sure what their care might be, and we might stay with them for quite some time. We had recently, in the last couple of years, a lady who actually ended up on East Midlands Today as a case that we were sort of saying, this is the sort of long-term care package that we provide. This lady had got herself into a situation where she had an awful lot of support. She was on probably 40 hours support a week. And working with the lady over a period of time, we actually educated her and supported her into what life might look like. She actually ended up volunteering in our day service for people with learning disability because she was an art teacher in a previous life. And she actually didn't have any support from us at all after the period of time that we spent with her, motivating her and bringing her life back to meaning something. She got her own driving license back and became completely independent. So, you know, sometimes complex care might be somebody particularly who needs that gradual, flexible, longer term providing back into independence. One of the most rewarding and specialist pathways that we do is end of life. As we say, you only get one chance to have somebody supported at the end of their life and make that a good time for them. Our GPs were very supportive when we went on to end of life because they recognise that when somebody is at the very end of their life, to change carers and to have lots of different carers going in is actually not a good time. And with the funding packages that we had at the time, when somebody became end of life, they would move from a domiciliary care agency to a health funded end of life care agency. And all of those carers would change within the last 2 or 3 weeks of that person's life. And that really wasn't where we wanted to be. So we worked with our health colleagues and we actually now stay into that person's package of care right up to the end of the life, and we just charge health for it, so that we're not actually changing our package of care going in. It has been incredibly rewarding for our carers as well, and we've had some lovely stories of carers actually staying with somebody overnight because they had no family and they wanted to be there right up to the end of that person's life, holding that person's hand and making sure that they weren't alone when they died. Next slide, please. So the reason we're really here today is to let you know that we've been CQC inspected. And we are inspected over 5 key lines of inquiry. And as Kelly has just explained to you with adult social care, our 5 key lines are safe, effective, caring, and responsive and well led. We are very, very proud and pleased to advise that we have outstanding overall. That is not insignificant to get that. So our safe, effective and caring have been awarded as good, and our responsive and well led have been awarded at outstanding, which means that we're outstanding overall. The inspector highlighted that the people using this service were at the heart of the service, very much a personalised service. And exceptionally responsive, person-centred care, which enabled them to live the life of their choosing. And that really made us feel very proud that the values that we set My Care up actually have been rewarded in the inspection, completely independent CQC inspection that we've had. Next slide. The sort of feedback we've received now, I've put the inspection report as part of your papers so you can read it at your leisure. But some of the feedback that we received are that the staff were kind and efficient and very helpful. The team were instrumental in the recovery of this particular person. People were supported to have maximum choice and control over their lives, and staff supported them in the least restrictive way. As we say, not everybody wants a whole load of professionals coming into their home every day, and we appreciate that. The policies and systems in place support the practice, and as we've seen with the adult social care inspection, you've got to have those systems, you've got to have that consistent policy, and we have that in place to make sure that we have that quality going forward. We went to considerable lengths to ensure people received that personalised care that was transformation and empowering for people, which was lovely to hear. We integrate really well with health and social care colleagues, and the inspector has actually highlighted that that is something of importance nationally and regionally, and she's putting us forward to show us as an example nationally and regionally of good practice, and we wait to hear how they want us to show that to other colleagues across the UK basically. And we support in conjunction with that health and social care colleagues, in such as we have staff trained to carry out those delegated healthcare tasks, so that we haven't got some of our district nurses going around and doing some of the tasks that we can do as a care worker, and we can encourage our health colleagues to actually concentrate on the specifics and specialisms that they have themselves. Next slide. So I just wanted to end my presentation before I hand over to extra input from Tammy and Sarah. During the pandemic, we asked one of our care workers to actually do a presentation to our staff, all staff briefing at the museum it was, so that across the council, the other workers, our colleagues within the local authority, could see what, when we say my care, what is that? What does it actually mean? So one of our workers did this little video for us. It's just 2 minutes, and I'd just love to share it with you, Jane.
Welcome amongst yourselves. I have to go around the wheel. Come on. Not the fastest. A bit like me. We've got no sound. Wow, that's not good.
You have to share the sound.
Yeah. It's been shared. I can't say it yet. That's what I've seen them do before, but I don't know. Oh. I've got a hammer in my hand, but I can't see what I'm doing.
That's what I've seen them do before. Yeah, that's work.
It switches up then. I know somebody the other day said something at the top, you have to share. Yes. On the very, very top. You see where it says mute? Is there something up there? Yeah.
We need to click the arrow.
Is the little arrow at the side? Is it share?
Same as system microphone? Well, so three sheets. That's a very good plan. The middle one won't work.
You didn't unfix it,
yeah.
Is there something about the speakers?
Oh,
yeah.
A bit further down, look.
Oh, that's on a tick. Speaks tick shows me too. It's also top. Yeah. Have you tried the top one, microphone, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, and hopefully and this is one of our care workers who during the pandemic is explaining what it's like to be a care worker on the front line in the pandemic when you know, there wasn't many people going out there. Sarah, I don't know whether you want to just explain a little bit about what Lucy was telling us here. All right, okay.
But I was one of the CSWs on the front line during the pandemic, and it was lonely. The roads were dead. It was just really, really quiet. Everywhere was quiet. So you kind of got into that bubble of instead of meeting up for a chat, we would text in and we would keep trying to keep each other upbeat and lively. And I think that's what Lucy was doing. I think she was making a little bit of a video to say, my office is now my car.
Mm. Absolutely. And you know, I can't stress enough how the extra mile all of these workers go, which has been recognised in the CQC inspection. You know, when it's snowing and it's 2 foot deep out there, in the last snow, for example, we had 2 of our care workers, one got stuck and had to be rescued to actually get to where they needed to be, and one tried to get up a hill that was very, very slippery. But the consistent work that they do in terms of knowing that somebody at the other end needs their support is just phenomenal. Tammy, do you want to add anything in on it?
I think you've covered everything, Emma Jane, but I'll help with any questions that come in if you like.
Thank you. I have read hundreds of reports over the time from CQC and Ofsted indeed. And from the CQC point of view, I don't remember reading one that's positive as this. And it reflects everything we thought about the service, but of course it's the evidence for it. So thank you, and thank you for your time and coming this late as well to present to us. Questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, please, Mr. Ainsley.
The key to this service is your good selves and your workers on the floor, isn't it? And the flexibility that you know. So how do you maintain that flexibility? Because it must be at times must be irksome.
Yeah, thank you. It is really, really difficult. And when we started off the trial in 2017, we did actually come to Scrutiny panel and talk to everybody about it, and we brought along some people that we were supporting. So it's easier now during the pandemic. So what happened was we just had 5 workers when we first started the trial. And when we knew that, okay, this is really good, we want to deliver this across Rutland, because we only delivered it in Oakham originally. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, but we'd already started the plans to restructure. So we were really, really nervous. But actually, the pandemic helped us in some respect, because it brought the team closer together. So we do have a bigger team now, and we do link around the geographical locations linked to the GP practices. But we are really lucky, because when we started the discharge to assess work, where we're now assessing people in the community rather than in hospital, health have supported us and allowed us to increase staffing. But we have a very, very strong coordinator team. Sarah's one of our coordinators, and Sarah started off as a support worker, and all of our coordinators have grown through the service. So they've come as a support worker, then they've done the coordinator. So they know a lot about the front line and everything that's happening. And they're really, really close. So that's how we manage the flexibility. But we only work to capacity. So if we were inundated with referrals, we wouldn't necessarily take every single referral. We'd have to prioritise and work to our staff capacity, and that would be it.
And I happen to know from other sources that the service that you provide is an exemplar to other areas, isn't it? And that is to be congratulated, really. I think that if I just think about the issues that I've covered off, unclogging the hospital beds, and releasing them into the community. And it's amazing the work that you're doing, I have to say, and I cannot thank you enough for the work that you are doing. I've got one criticism though. This report, why is the service safe only a good, the service effective only good, and service caring only good? Shouldn't that have been exemplary, outstanding across the board? You can say yes.
Yes, do you know what? We was actually upset that our caring wasn't outstanding, because that's the one that we would always want first to be, but any outstanding for us, any recognition. And if we would have just got one outstanding, we would have been very, very disheartened, but to take us to an overall, that was really good. And this is actually the first time, I believe, that Rutland County Council has been rated overall outstanding. And it was My Care's first inspection. They'd never been inspected.
I think you're outstanding.
Any other questions from anyone? No? In which case, yes, very well done. I do remember you coming at the beginning with your users, your 2 users, and even then I was bowled over by it, but far more so now, I think. So there are no words to say how grateful the people of Rutland are for the work that you do. So thank you, and make sure everybody in the team understands that, will you please?
Thank you. And we are planning a celebration event. You know, obviously with elections and Purdah and everything, we've sort of put that little bit on hold until we can really have a really good celebration. So hopefully towards middle end of May, I think the staff would really welcome you know, some sort of recognition that we can do properly.
They deserve it. You've only got 3 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry,
Total.
sorry, councillor, can you put me?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
With the upskilling, and because you're being cross-trained in so many areas, aren't you? Why aren't everybody leaving in droves and being poached? Is it because you're so happy here?
I would certainly love Sarah to answer that one, because you know the retention in My Care is phenomenal. We've got people working that have been working in My Care for a long time, and I think the job satisfaction and the retention is what we pride ourselves on. I mean, Sarah's moved from a support worker to a coordinator, so
yes,
go for it.
Very much so. A lot of people say that workplaces is like having an extended family, but we are an extended family. We're all open with each other, everybody gets on, and our main focus is our service users, and that shows across the board with all our CSWs, all of them, and we all have the same outcome and the outcome that we want to reach. We're all on the same page, we follow all the policies and procedures, we all know where we're at, and that's why we work.
Congratulations, really.
Thank you very much indeed. And we look forward to your celebrations later in May. Thank you. Right, very quickly, do you have anything you wish to update us with, Mr. Brown? I know your ongoing economic strategy task and finish group is working away.
Yes, we did have a meeting where we discussed various items that we discussed before, and we sort of refined them a little bit, and the document is beginning to take shape. And what I think I'll do is circulate these notes.
Thank you very much. And perhaps you could let the clerk have them so they can be appended to the minutes as well. So
Yeah.
no change. Thank you. I've lost where I am now. Then a review of the forward plan. I think it's there is no forward plan because of the elections, so nothing to review. No any other urgent business. And for those of you who are going to be on this committee, your next meeting is the 15th of June. And I've just got it in time before we had to have an extension. So thank you, everyone.